Okay, it's 6 o'clock on June 5th, 2023, and I will call this meeting of the Chelmsford Select Board to order. Would you please stand and join me for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. He said he wasn't.
I told you differently.
Yeah. Okay, first up, public service announcements.
Okay. We're going
Got
to be
plenty
here a
of them.
while, yeah. Well, we start with ATEF, and I know Evelyn is here to make those presentations. So I don't have to do those.
Good evening. I'm Evelyn Thorin. I'm the chair of the Arts and Technology Education Fund. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity again to appear before you. I know that I appear before you several times during the year. One is when we have our applications available, and the other one's close to when the application deadline at March 31st comes around, so that anyone that may be listening would be aware of what those dates would be. I also want to thank the taxpayers of Chelmsford because they are the ones that donate to this fund. And this committee takes it extremely seriously. We've come up with project summary sheets. Everything is as transparent as possible. I hate to use that word all the time, but it started back in 1996, and we wanted to make sure that whatever money was given, it was accounted for. And so before an applicant can be made, can actually fill one out, they have to give us a project summary sheet if they have received an award in a prior year. That way we know what they did with the money and how it worked and how they advertised for it. I'd like to also thank the committee members of the Arts and Technology Education Fund because they do give their time and energy and education to this particular committee. We have Dr. Jay Lang and Dr. Linda Hirsch. We go through the Chelmsford Public School system also to make sure that this is not part of a budget, that it is acceptable within the curriculum and can be established with regard to that. We have Kirk Marshall, Beverly Barrett, Hannah Barber, Teresa Evans, Candy Chase. We have a new person, Elizabeth Hasty, and Carrie Meikle. So they are, work very cooperatively together, and we have an awful lot of fun. I think of all the committees, I've been on a lot of committees in this town, this is the most fun and the most rewarding because you actually get to see in the system exactly where the money is going and how it affects all of the classrooms. We have 3 awards this year for the 2023-2024 academic year. And Mary Ellen Forty is not here with us. We gave her $280 for promoting preschool process art. She's at Westland Schools. She has applied many times before. She's building a program. And we can see what those outcomes are. And we're very excited every time we see one of the applications to see what is new that she's going to be doing. The next application is David Steves. So if you want to come up. It's interactive robotic video integration. And you may wonder what that is, but if you know video, obviously it's cameras that's there. And it's going to support the robotics courses and the principal of engineering courses throughout the school year at Chelmsford High School. Do you want to add anything to that?
I just was going to say that, thank you for everything you do. And it should be a lot of fun for the students. They love to take video moving forward as they move into college with part of their portfolio of work. And it's a lot of fun for them. They can record their robots, what the robots are doing, and anything they really build with any of the engineering classes. And it's just a whole lot safer and much better image stabilization than their cell phones. So thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so Candy's going to take our picture so we can put it on our website. Just tell us when you're done.
Yeah, well, it's not.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations again. And the last award that we have is for Megan Kennedy and Lindsay O'Neill. If you want to come up. They are receiving $993.70, to be specific, on their particular one, because they add it all up, on sensory materials. And this supports the social emotional curriculum. And in supporting that particular curriculum, then obviously it's throughout the whole school, and they at Byam School. And if you would like to add any more to that, you're welcome to do so.
We just really
They'll come
wanted.
up to the mic because they can't hear for them.
Oh gosh, then I may be too loud. We just really wanted to say thank you so much for your consideration and for choosing us. You know, with these sensory materials, we're really going to be able to bring, comfort to the students and being able to help, re-regulate them at times when they're needed. So we really appreciate your consideration and for granting this one. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Thank you. For playing. We'll hold that. Yes, and Candace's going to take our picture.
Nice.
Thank you very much. So there are some years we've given out 17, so I felt as though if we only had 2 people speaking, it would be a little bit better than 17. We'd be here for a very long time. But it is interesting, and just because I know I get really excited about all this stuff to do with education, doesn't mean everybody does. But it's a wonderful thing to be able to have the opportunity of meeting the different staff members and getting back into the school and seeing exactly what they're doing and seeing how things have evolved over time. So do you have any questions of me?
No?
Okay.
Thank you.
This
Thank
is
you.
also a committee that doesn't meet very often during the year. So the next time I think we're meeting is in the fall in anticipation of the new academic year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next is a proclamation for LGBTQ plus Pride Month, and I think there's, might be somebody here to accept the proclamation, but I'll read it anyway. The Town of Chelmsford Proclamation for Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer Pride Month, June 2023. Whereas the Town of Chelmsford is a welcoming community and an exceptional place to live, work, play, and raise a family, and whereas Chelmsford recognizes the importance of equality and freedom, and whereas the nation was founded upon and is guided by a set of principles that includes that every person has been created equal, that each has rights to their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and that each shall be accorded the full recognition and protection of law. And whereas the Town of Chelmsford lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community are a vital part of all fields and professions and can contribute to a stronger community. And whereas the Town of Chelmsford is dedicated to fostering acceptance of all its citizens and preventing discrimination and bullying based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And whereas Chelmsford is strengthened by and thrives upon the rich diversity of the ethnic, cultural, racial, gender, and sexual identities of its residents, all of which contribute to the vibrant character of our town. And whereas the Centers for Disease Control recognizes that LGBTQ plus teens are at higher risk to be the victims of violence and have increased suicide rates, and whereas it is imperative that young people in the community, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, feel valued, safe, empowered, and supported by their peers, educators, and community leaders. Now, therefore, we, the Chelmsford Select Board, on behalf of the Town of Chelmsford, hereby proclaim and recognize June 2023 as Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer Pride Month in the Town of Chelmsford, and urge citizens to recognize and celebrate the contributions made by members of the LGBTQ plus community, and to actively promote the principles of equality and liberty. Signed this 5th day of June 2023 by the Select Board and sealed by the Town Clerk.
Thank you.
I am representing Rainbow Chelmsford.
Okay.
Thank you very much,
you.
all of you. It means so much. Thank you.
Are you up for the next,
I believe it's Pride at the Market, right?
you can talk?
Figured I'd stay up, talk a little bit about it. So Market on the Common is underway. We've had 2 weekends so far, and they've been very successful. We have more vendors this year, and excited to see more and more added as the season goes on. So last year, we held a very small Pride at the Market event. This year, we've made it slightly bigger, but similar flavor to it, family-friendly event where we'll offer up resources and educational materials, as well as activities for adults and children as well. Rainbow Chelmsford will be there representing. The health department puts on a really terrific table with resources. And then, of course, we'll have our terrific market vendors for that day, artisans and bakers and farmers with early produce. So just want to encourage everyone to come out 11 to 2 on the Common on Saturday. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Okay, kind of changing topics here a little bit. The next is learning hands-only CPR. This is presented by the Chelmsford Board of Health. You can learn how to save a life in just a few minutes. This program will be going on Tuesday, June 6th at the Chelmsford Library McCarthy Meeting Room from 4 to 6:30 p.m., and this is just for a drop-in only. The training includes assessing the scene for safety and calling 911, giving chest compressions, and you'll get to practice on mannequins, and you'll also learn AED basics. And this, as I said, is a drop-in just for a quick demonstration. It's not for the entire 2.5 hours. It takes just a few minutes. If you have any questions, you can contact the Board of Health at 978-250-5241. Next is June trainings for Narcan. The Board of Health is presenting a Narcan training session on June 8th at 2 p.m. at Chelmsford Town Hall in the training room on the lower level. This is open to everybody, but registration is required. This is a relatively short program. I have gone through it, and anybody who goes through the process does receive an opioid rescue kit, which includes a couple doses of Narcan. So I highly encourage it. Next is getting back to the Pride celebration. On June 10th, the Chelmsford Center for the Arts and Chelmsford Community Services will invite you to celebrate Pride Month with a celebration with a drag show featuring Nikita LaFemme, Victoria Obvious, T. Sparks, and Raconic. This will be Saturday, June 10th at the CCA at 7 p.m. Tickets are available on the CCA website, and it does include a cash bar. Next is Representative Simon Cataldo is conducting office hours in Chelmsford on June 12th at the Chelmsford Public Library from 12 to 2 p.m. Next, also on that day, on June 12th, Town of Chelmsford is going to have a municipal open house from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Chelmsford Library. Come and learn about different committees and boards that we have in town and what the town does for you and how we can, and we want to hear from you how we can help you do things better. Representatives from boards and committees are going to be present. You can ask them questions about how involved, what the commitment might be to serve on a board or committee, and find out what committees do what and which ones you might have interest in. And we also want to find out how we can get the word out more effectively. So we'll be asking you that, how you found out about this event, and so we know how to publicize them in the future. Next is a free event called Growing Positivity Between Our Youth and Seniors. The Chelmsford Health Department is sponsoring this second annual event where youth can decorate a plant pot and attach a positive quote. These plants will then be delivered to the senior center and distributed to seniors. This is going to be on Tuesday, June 13th, from 9 to 6:30 p.m. This is at the Chelmsford Town Hall gym, here in the town offices in the gym in the back. And this is for any youth ages 10 and up. It brings a smile to the senior and gives the youth a chance to have a positive impact on their community. Next, Massachusetts Department of Transportation is conducting a public hearing on a design for replacement of two bridges in Chelmsford that go over I-495. At this public hearing, you'll see a design of how those bridges are going to be laid out. If you have any questions or have any feedback, they'll be interested in hearing those. And these two bridges are one that goes over 495 on Gorham Street, and the other one that goes over 495 at Westford Street. This is a virtual hearing. It will be Wednesday, June 14th at 6 p.m. To get a link to the hearing, you can go to mass.gov/orgs/highway-division/events, and that information is on the town website if you didn't catch that. Next, Chelmsford's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee invites you to the third annual Juneteenth celebration, which is going to be on the Chelmsford Town Common on Saturday, June 17th, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. There'll be African and soul food, music by DJ Tony, games, dancing, performers, vendors, and a kids zone. There'll be a keynote speaker who is Brent Smith, who is Dean and Professor of Communications at Emerson College. And the next one, I believe we have somebody to speak about, is the parade.
Good evening. Lynn Marcella and Jeff Hardy with the Parade Committee. And if you'll indulge us for a few minutes, we have a lot to say, so hopefully we can get through this pretty quickly. We want to thank everybody for their support of the parade. Hopefully this year, we're back to a normal situation. Last year, it was a little difficult with COVID, but things seem to be back to normal. We have a lot of great, wonderful bands and entertainment coming. We have 3 bands coming from Canada again this year, and it should be fabulous. As everybody has seen, the banners have gone up in the center, Vinyl Square and Drum Hill, and we want to thank all of those who supported the banners this year. That is what helps us pay for the entertainment that comes to the parade. Special thanks to the crew of the DPW who have been hanging the banners for us. We used to climb ladders for many years hanging the banners ourselves, which got a little bit dangerous and a little bit difficult. So we are just very grateful to them using the bucket truck to get them hung. Our committee has worked tirelessly all year. It's not just a week in July, it's a year-round thing to plan. And our committee consists of Candy and Sam Chase, Paige Gillette, Jeff Hardy, Jennifer and Paul Hardy, Eric Lindstead, Chuck and Lynn Marcella, Kirk Marshall, Brian and Karen Reedy, and Rick Romano. We also have great liaisons from the town, Town Manager Paul Cohen and Select Board Pat Wojcik, who have been a great help to us, and we thank the 2 of you. And also Lieutenant Jason Poor from the Police Department that's been working with us with all the security and bridge permits and everything we need. We'd also like to thank Chelmsford Telemedia because they are a big help, as you know, that they televise the whole event, and it is a lot of work to do it. We thank all the volunteers. In addition to the committee, we look for volunteers every year to carry banners in the parade and to help with many other things. And we'd like to remind everybody, if you want to be involved, I know at the Select Board meeting, they always mention the parade committee welcomes new members, and we really do, but also volunteers that day to carry banners. So if you're interested, contact us via our website, which is chelmsfordparade.org, or send us an email at chelmsfordparade@aol.com. This year, again, we started last year having a concert on the Common a couple of nights before the parade. So on Sunday, July 2nd, we will be having the concert on the Common again, and it will be featuring Eckstein and the Intense, and it should be great. Everybody that went last year really enjoyed it. We're hoping to have some food trucks and some other activity that night also. The Lions Club will be having the Country Fair on Monday, July 3rd and Tuesday, July 4th. The Art Society will be having their art show Monday, July 3rd and Tuesday, July 4th. The Center for the Arts will also be having activities. I don't know exactly what they're doing. They're still planning from what we understand, but also those 2 days. And the John Carson Memorial Road Race will be held again starting at 9:30 a.m., and the parade will kick off at 10 a.m. And last thing is I would like to thank the sponsors that we have for this year's parade, and we still welcome more sponsors, of course. It takes a lot, as I said earlier, to put this parade on, and we so appreciate all these businesses and families that have come forward to help fund this parade. Premium sponsors this year include Blake Funeral Home and Enterprise Bank. Our red sponsors are Aggregate Industries, Charlene Parley at the C.A. Parley Farm, Dolan Funeral Home and Lowell 5. White sponsors are Chelmsford Business Association and the John Honeywell Trust, Pride Star EMS and Sterling Office Systems, and finally Brian Boyle Electric, Chelmsford Lumber Company, Complete Game Physical Therapy, E.L. Harvey Waste Systems, Lamakia Realty, Nissan of Merrimack Valley, Outdoor Pride, and Waddington North America. Certainly a big help to have this many sponsors, and again, we welcome more. It helps a lot. And then Jeff is here with me today to announce our parade marshal for this year.
Just to add to what Lynn said, and no disrespect to Evelyn, but this is the best committee in town. To add what Lynn mentioned, we are having a concert on July 2nd. It's going to start at like 5 o'clock because we're going to have 2 bands this year. You don't remember the name of it? It was the blues band that was in the parade last year that everybody really seemed to enjoy. So we're gonna have them start around 5. We were hoping to add to it and get some kids' events going on, so families could come down, go to the food trucks and listen to some music. You can still do that. You know, let them run around the common, just make sure they don't hurt themselves. All right, so on to the parade marshal. So every year, we're challenged to find a worthy person, and this year I think we've done a great job. John and Linda Carson have lived in Chelmsford for over 50 years. Both have and continue to be actively involved in the Chelmsford volunteer community activities. That helps. John obtained his bachelor's in mechanical engineering from Northeastern University and his PhD from MIT. He was employed for over 50 years by Jenneke and Johansson, an international engineering consulting firm. He served as its president for over 30 years. John is well known for his technical abilities in the field of storage flow of powders and bulk solids. Having authored over 150 technical papers on various topics related to his industry, in 2018, John retired from day-to-day active management and now currently serves as President Emeritus of the company. John has contributed many volunteer hours to Chelmsford through his past service as a select board member, and he and Linda are actively involved in charitable work as well. John serves on the board of the Greater Lowell General Hospital, is co-chair of the Believe and Become campaign at the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Lowell, and chairs the Moses Greeley Parker Lecture Series. Linda, who worked for many years as an RN, visits patients each week as a member of the Spiritual Care Committee at Lowell General Hospital, which serves meals at the Boys and Girls Clubs and leads the prayer shawl ministry at the Congregational Church. John and Linda also sponsored the John R. Carson Road Race, which is regionally famous race which raises money for a scholarship in their son's memory. It's been the starting point of the 4th of July celebration for 30 years. To this date, they've awarded over $100,000 in scholarships. Additionally, John and Linda helped to maintain the John R. Carson Memorial Park at Central Congregational Church. We acknowledge their civil service by honoring them as this year's 4th of July parade marshals. And I think that's it.
Good selection.
Great selection.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions?
No,
Good, we'll
It's
see you on
great.
the 4th.
thank you.
We're already
Hope for
working
better
on.
weather.
It doesn't rain on our parade. I've made that rule.
No hail.
We're already working on next year's events, and we're hoping to do some bigger and better stuff. As long as my committee stays with me.
We're gonna leave now, though.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Okay, next up is public input.
Wait a minute,
Oh.
I have one more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, the last public service announcement is a joint meeting between the Select Board and the Planning Board to fill a vacancy on the Planning Board. In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 11, the Select Board and the Planning Board will hold a joint meeting on Monday, June 26, 2023, at 6 p.m. in Room 204 of the Chelmsford Town Offices to fill a vacancy on the Planning Board. The person so appointed shall be a registered voter of the town and shall perform the duties of a Planning Board member until the April 2nd, 2024 annual town election. Anyone who's interested in being appointed to fill said vacancy should send a written letter of interest or a committee application to the Select Board or appear at the June 26th joint meeting.
Thanks, Pat, that's an
Well
important
done.
one.
Yes.
Okay, next up, public input. Anybody who wishes to speak?
Good evening, folks. Jen Melanson, Community Services Coordinator. Hope you'll indulge me for a couple more minutes. On May 16th, 2022, Chelmsford's Select Board, along with Chelmsford's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, held a listening session for the LGBTQ+ community of Chelmsford. The purpose of this listening session was to hear from members of the community how Chelmsford could be made more welcoming and inclusive to our LGBTQ+ residents. One by one, community members urged the Select Board and the DEIC to take more actions to display that Chelmsford is a welcoming and safe home for the LGBTQ+ community. On March 22nd, 2023, the town manager, with the overwhelming support of town department heads, graciously granted a request made by the family of Juniper Junie Dillon to light the monument on the town common using blue and yellow floodlights to raise awareness for sudden, unexplained death in childhood. The lighting of the monument in this way served as an important symbol of support, not just to Junie's family, but to all of those in our community who have been devastated by the tragic, unexplained death of a child. As the Community Services Coordinator, and in partnership with the DEIC, I wanted to formally request that the Select Board approve that the monument on the town common be lit in rainbow floodlights, the colors representing LGBTQ+ pride, on June 10th in conjunction with Pride celebration events taking place that day and evening. By doing so, the Select Board would demonstrate that the listening session held last May was not merely performative, but that the town of Chelmsford takes seriously the task of making Chelmsford welcoming and safe to our LGBTQ+ population. Unfortunately, my request to be added to the agenda for tonight's meeting was denied, which is why I stand before you now during the public input portion of the meeting. I understand that my request was denied because the board does not currently have a formal policy on lighting the monument or any other town structures. I also understand that this is something that the board may discuss and consider in the future. And just some food for thought on the subject, and I offer this up purely with respect. The gesture of lighting a structure for a cause is a sign of community support that shows that the town of Chelmsford is a livable, inclusive, diverse, welcoming, multi-generational community, the very tenet of the town's vision statement adopted by the board on July 27th, 2020. Many of the town's values that were adopted that same day would be upheld, including inclusiveness and diversity, civic community and engagement, transparency, honesty and integrity, and respect and empathy. I am here advocating for the community of Chelmsford on this topic, not just because it is Pride Month. By the way, it also happens to be PTSD Awareness Month and Black Musician Month, and probably other causes as well that I don't know about. I believe the community would also like to see a town structure lit in the color of purple, for example, for overdose awareness, or red for Heart Disease Month, or blue for arthritis awareness. While it may at times prove to be a difficult decision for the board to discern which events or campaigns to support, we sometimes have to do hard things, and we should always do what is right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian Latina, town meeting rep, precinct 9, and resident for the last 30 years or so at 15 Jesse Road, Chelmsford. Just like to remind the board, interesting idea. However, town meeting has a bylaw against colored lighting of buildings and structures. So that would be against current town meeting bylaw, however well-intentioned that is. The reason I came up here wasn't for that, but some of our newer apartments in town don't understand or we don't apply the state law that says when you move into town, you're supposed to, from another state, you're supposed to change your license plate to our community, Massachusetts. And as a result, we don't get the excise taxes. So as a thought and looking at us paying taxes on our cars, I drove through Kinloch, and there are 18 cars in there that are in either New Hampshire, New York, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania. Now, the only ones that should be foreign plates are visitors, but this is very consistent. It's been this way for the last year or so, and I recommended to the one of the police traffic officers that we should really invite these people that move into our community, like I was invited when I moved into Chelmsford almost 30 years ago by a welcome wagon. They welcomed me into town and told us what the services were. Simple letter might be reasonable. We could place a letter on the license on the automobiles that have New Hampshire plates, Pennsylvania or whatever, and welcome them to Chelmsford, give them an application for changing their registration to our community. so that we would get, in this case, 18 cars. Massachusetts considers that about $36,000 per car. That's $648,000, or about $16,000 per year that we lose in that one apartment complex. That would make them feel inclusive and part of Chelmsford if you tell them some of the things that we have as benefits in our town. We don't have a newspaper anymore for all intents and purposes, and I think that would be a nice way to do it. 30 days later, you could also send them a note saying, hey, we told you 30 days ago, and now you get a ticket. That's how it's supposed to be. The police department doesn't enforce that now, apparently. Also, just as a side note, the ZBA just had a meeting the other night about putting a cell tower up on our 495 entrance to Chelmsford from the South Shore, 495 northbound. Kind of my favorite topic for the last 10 or 15 years. There's a rest area there that is our entrance to our town from the south. And it occurred to me that they now have a fence around the old bathroom facility and welcome center. It's, I guess, under some kind of renovation. And where we had some of our state reps, my thought was, it's time to tear down that building or take some bleach and clean it. It only took 4 years for the entire city of New Orleans to clean the building when they had a flood down there. And that flood was 15 feet inside of the buildings. So it's time to get the outhouses out of that area, and perhaps since they've come to Chelmsford to ask for a cell tower, it's time for us to go to the state and ask formally for them to renovate that building so that we have a nice welcome to Chelmsford instead of what we have there now. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else for public input? Okay. Moving on, committee vacancies.
Okay, as of today, we have the following committee vacancies. There's one vacancy on the Zoning Board of Appeals, one vacancy on the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee, one spot on the Commission on Disabilities. There are 4 vacancies on the Community Action Program Committee, 2 vacancies on the Council on Aging Board, 1 vacancy on the Holiday Decorating Committee. As mentioned earlier, the Parade Committee welcomes all applicants. There's 1 vacancy on the Permanent Building Committee, 1 vacancy on the Recycling Committee, and 1 vacancy on the Tree Committee. If you're interested in any of these vacancies, you can fill out an application online or go to the Town Manager's office for more information.
Okay, thanks, Pat. Next up, discussion with town legislative delegation to discuss legislative priorities. And who do we have today? You want to, Senator Cerro?
Rodney Elliott, the Representative Elliott can take the seats at the table. We have Senator Barrett joining us remotely.
Yep.
And we have Kyle.
Hey, Senator.
How are you?
Senator Cataldo's office. And we have from Representative Trahan's office as well.
Okay. We have specific questions that we want to pose here? Or?
Well, I think the first thing they can do is maybe defer is sort of where you are right now in the budget process.
Sure.
And what we can anticipate in the next 2 months.
Absolutely. Well, Senate, we completed ours probably at the end of April on the House budget, and the Senate just had their debate and finished their budget deliberations about a week ago. So now there's something called the Conference Committee. So there'll be 3 members of the House and 3 members of the Senate that are going to sort of reconcile the differences and come up with one finished product. One thing I wanted to bring up I thought was relevant is we did come in initially a few months ago, I think now, to talk about the budget and where we were after the House came out with their initial budget schedule. But I'd like to report that we're 3 for 3 on the earmarks that were asked for from the board in the state budget, and I'll read those off if you give me 1 second. One was for, Representative, why don't you start with yours in vinyl square, and then as I rip the other 3 out from I'll move to there.
Sure, good evening. Mr. Chairman, member of the board, members of the select board, thank you for having us again. So for my district includes Centerville and Pawtucketville, and I'll just report that in this year's budget there's $20,000 for vinyl square for beautification and improvements in that particular area.
And the reason I brought that up was because I had to pull it out of my thing first, but also, I believe the board asked for the Chelmsford Rose School lighting protection, which was $70,000. The Chelmsford Incident Command Vehicle, which was $70,000. Congratulations to Chief Spinney. He won't be able to see the new vehicle, I don't think it's. To Chelmsford Council on Aging for the food insecurity, that's $25,000. So we were 3 for 3 on the earmarks. Oh, Senator.
Yes, hi, I want to thank Jim. We are 3 for 3 in the House, and we can add a fourth from the Senate as well. The electrification roadmap study the town requested, $75,000, is in there as a Senate earmark, and we repeated the Chelmsford Council on Aging. The Senate's always supplied $25,000. I think this is probably our 4th or 5th year of doing that. So we doubled down on that, and appreciate the House's leadership on that point. These earmarks should be guarantees. At least traditionally, every earmark the House has done for Chelmsford has been agreed to later by the Senate, and every earmark the Senate's done for Chelmsford has been agreed to in the conference committee by the House. So I keep famous last words, but I think the Council on Aging, the Rowe Elementary School, the Chelmsford Police Department, and the electrification roadmap study should be just about sure things. And by the way, I want to apologize for not being with you all. I just completed a 5-hour hearing. The Joint Committee on TUE, the Senate members, started at 1, concluded at 5:30. Couldn't make it up to Chelmsford in time, and that's why I'm in my State House office joining you all remotely.
Thank you. Other questions? I mean, mine would be on the Ledge Road, the home rule petition, if you had a status update on that.
Absolutely. Representative?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we did receive the home rule certified copy from the town clerk. We submitted it to House Counsel. The bill has been given a number, House Bill 3876. House Bill 3876. That's been referred to the Joint Committee on Transportation. It has not, there has not been a scheduled hearing as of this date, but next week, the Joint Committee on Transportation, they have been meeting regularly, and I anticipate that a hearing should be conducted sometime in the near future. I'm not sure. Representative Arcero probably has a better idea, but some of these committees have several hundred bills that are referred to them, and I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason when they're scheduled. But as soon as I do learn of this, and members are contacted when their bills are going to be heard, I'll be sure to reach out to you, Mr. Chair, and the liaison, Selectwoman Crockett-Timmons, and Town Manager to let folks know when that bill is going to be heard, to submit either written testimony, come down to the State House, testify in person, but I'll make sure that I post it on social media as well as some of the town sites to get the word out. And I suppose at any given time, letters of support can be submitted through me. But I think once the hearing is scheduled, it'll be good to have some support. And again, testimony can be submitted to the committee itself, but I just don't have that contact information. So more information forthcoming, but it is filed. And by the way, Representative Arcero, Representative Simon Cataldo, as well as Senator Barrett have co-sponsored this legislation.
Great.
And that is, we look at certainly as a team effort, and we anticipate we'll have a hearing date sooner than later.
Okay.
It is late filed, but we certainly will be talking to the chair, Representative Strauss, about it.
Great, thank you.
Of course.
Other questions?
We have a whole list from last time, Paul, right?
Sure, yeah, we have the list from last time, but,
From last meeting.
from the last meeting when we discussed, but I guess the question, if I could just intercede for 1 second, we've got Senator Barrett on the call, who's chair of, as he mentioned, of energy and telecommunications. If he could sort of just give us an overview of what maybe under consideration, it may impact Chelmsford, and then obviously for housing representative.
Sure.
If you could do that. So Senator Barrett, thank you for waiting patiently. I know you've been on since the beginning of the meeting.
Thank you, Paul. Happy to be joining you all. And again, I'm apologetic that I can't be there in person. This hearing ran late, as you might imagine. The climate committee, the Telecommunications Utility and Energy Committee, will probably take up 2 or 3 issues that are going to be of interest to the town in particular. One is likely to be transmission. This whole question of how to hook up solar projects, for example, in Greater Lowell to the electric grid without costing people an arm and a leg. There is all this talk, I know many people in town have heard it, about the need to modernize the grid, and that need is there. The legislature's keeping a close eye on costs, because the modernization of the grid ultimately is going to be reflected in people's monthly electric bills. They're already quite high. We don't want them to go any higher than they absolutely need to go. So building out the grid, but with some sort of protection for consumers, is a really important safeguard that we hope to ensure. A second major theme for the year, I think, is going to be simplification, or some kind of reduction in the bureaucratic requirements that it takes in general for a business in Chelmsford with a solar array on the roof, or for that matter, a homeowner who puts up solar and is waiting for Eversource and National Grid to make the connection, the interconnection to the grid. As people there in town know, it can take months, even after you've got the panels on the roof, for you to begin to generate electricity. So there's a real interest in simplifying that process for people, and in making sure that we don't just see the bureaucratic process drag on forever. I hope that folks in town who are looking at electric vehicles realize that there is a state subsidy that's been increased. There has been a lot of publicity. The federal subsidies for electric vehicles do depend on domestic content requirements. The batteries in those EVs have got to be domestically sourced. The overall vehicle has to have a large and growing percentage of domestic content, meaning non-imported content too. Important long-term for bringing manufacturing jobs back to Massachusetts and the country. But the state subsidy, which is now $3,500, is available without regard to the domestic content requirements. We wanted that to be something upfront available to people in town and in the state, even as the federal goals advance those domestic manufacturing priorities. So we have increased those state subsidies. They are available, and I hope that people considering EV purchases, which are still very expensive, I appreciate that, but they're getting a little better. I hope that townspeople realize that the state subsidy is one that is open to them right now. In any event, I think you're going to see that the transmission piece and the regulatory simplification piece being meaningful for businesses and townspeople in the area.
Thank you, Senator. And before we get to Representative Arcero, I'm going to weave in the question, as Virginia was suggesting. The board has had concerns recently about utilities, namely National Grid, in terms of tree removal, replacement, work done in environmentally sensitive areas, and also the concerns about lack of restricted access to ATVs and utility corridors and so forth. And I guess if you could sort of help us understand how the best way to go about that effort may.
I hope that I can be helpful there, Paul. A call to me or a letter to me that's very specific, that names the nature of the problem, how long the town or a citizen of the town has been seeking relief, the wait for state action that hasn't been forthcoming. If you can give me particulars, I'm happy to call the Department of Public Utilities. There are some other state energy-related agencies that could be conceivably playing a major role. There's the Department of Energy Resources. The acronym is DOER. I won't go through all of them, but I do want to be available. And I think, as members of the House there can attest, the legislative liaisons are pretty, for each of these state-level agencies, are pretty responsive to legislators. So if you're having trouble getting action directly, channeling that request through one of us, it's not a guarantee, but it can often be of help. And I would certainly hope to help with respect to energy-related agencies. But specifics are the key so that we can be as authoritative in those phone messages as possible. And typically they will be phone calls.
Underground utilities.
So let me know and I'll be happy to take a crack at them.
Yeah, related to that, and I'll send you information, and I think I mentioned in my scheduling thing, one of the big concerns in Chelmsford continues to be the underground utility project in Chelmsford Center, which was first envisioned over a generation ago, when the years began with 1-9.
Yeah, I know, I'm very familiar with it.
And the first phase around the Common is beautiful, and it's been so well received. People are saying, well, when is the next phase going to begin? And just give me a moment to explain what the problem is. We have, for the last several years, have shut down the National Grid surcharge because there's over $3 million in the account. The reason for the shutdown of the delay is that the legislation, including the special act back in 2010 for the town of Chelmsford, it funds the Verizon work by the surcharge on landlines. Which, if anyone knows today's world, the amount of revenue that's received from landlines is diminishing significantly. And because of that work, that was the initial reason that Verizon delayed phase 2. And then once they recovered their costs on phase 1, without notice to the town, they suspended their surcharge, and therefore no phase 2 was beginning. And again, I don't mean to minimize the significant expense that will be involved to bury the Verizon trunk lines through the center, the heart of the community, and realize it would take some period of time to collect the revenues from landline surcharges. But that's the quagmire that we're in right now in terms of, the town is seeking and hoping to initiate the next phase through the center. But the problem is you cannot spend the National Grid money on Verizon work, rightfully so. But right now, we're not moving at all, and it's been that way for several years. So I will follow up, as you suggested, with more written details and such.
Something like that, Paul, is not going to. That's. I'm happy to take it on. That's going to be a heavier lift, and I don't pretend to know.
Right. And I just don't
when
know.
We can get things moving, but the more information you can give me, the better armed I'll be, and I am happy to make those calls.
Okay. I mean, I understand what happens is sometimes the laws don't keep up with the times and the technology, and this may be the case here with funding a utility project from landline, surcharges when that's obviously a diminishing share of the business.
What would be the substitute source of money that would make this happen, Paul?
Well, that's what we would need to discuss. How would that be? Yeah. You can't use wireless because wireless has no base.
Right.
And so that's the question is how do we initiate the next phase for that project?
So you're saying there's no money?
But yet the state law doesn't speak to a revenue schedule. And that's I think is sort of, again, referencing how the law is outdated. What it speaks to.
Well, this is going to take. This is probably going to take more than a phone call.
Exactly.
It sounds like there's some basic, some basic problem solving that we need to do on our side, right? The state and the local side. Do we have a proposal that we think makes sense that we're propounding to National Grid?
Well, National Grid's fine. It's Verizon that's the issue.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, okay, Verizon. I will tell you, just as long as we're brainstorming here, Telecom is primarily a federal undertaking. The name of my committee is Telecom, Communications, Utilities, and Energy. It's just a quirk. The state government has lots of control over utilities, National Grid and Eversource in the case of Chelmsford. Much less control over the telecom companies like Verizon, which are primarily subject to the Federal Communications Commission and to federal law. I guess because those telecommunications companies operate in multiple states, they're preempted by federal statutes for the most part. Electric and natural gas utilities are very different and are primarily creatures of state law. So I'm just
Okay.
information sharing that you should be able to count on your legislative delegation for some sort of responsiveness with respect to natural gas and electric power utilities. Verizon, though, is a different story. They just don't depend on state government as much to be able to operate, and I think we have commensurately less leverage as a consequence.
That may explain their behavior. Okay, thanks. All right, Representative Arcero, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Just to touch on housing a little bit, last session I was named the chair of the Joint Committee on Housing on the House side during the middle of the pandemic. Certainly a daunting task, but we're proud to say that during that period of time, we were able to get almost $1 billion of ARPA money out to people for rental assistance during that period of time, and keep people housed. It was a very difficult situation. As we all know, we all chipped in, especially in public service, to help people during the pandemic. But moving on to this legislative session, and as the pandemic receded, we certainly knew that there was a crisis in housing before the crisis of the pandemic. And some of the things that we have as public officials in the housing space essentially is to take care of our most vulnerable, to provide sound housing policy. Right now, it's production, it's building, it's supply and demand, it's building more housing across the state, all sorts of housing, workforce housing, veterans housing, affordable housing, and market rate. But we also need to provide tools in the toolbox for communities. I know that there's been, if you look at the statistics of the housing choice and the MBTA communities legislation that went through about 3.5 years ago now, 72 of 80 communities complied on the initial zoning. So it has worked so far. But just today is the first day that Secretary Ed Augustus has been named the new Housing Secretariat. Governor Maura Healey believed that because of the importance of the issue, that they needed to have its own secretariat specific to that, not Department of Housing and Community Development, which was in the past. So there was this sort of secretariat that did the economic development piece of it as well as housing. Certainly they're both at the same intersection, but we needed to have more focus. One of the things I'm having a meeting with the secretary about is about MBTA communities. We've seen a lot of communities that have had a lot of questions, a lot of technical assistance that they've needed, and I really think that they need to provide more tools within the Secretariat's office for communities to have a liaison. That has been a challenge. That's what my office has heard quite a bit about, is just the technical assistance, the communication with the administration on moving forward with their plans, especially with adjacent communities, that there's a little bit of clarity on the distance between counting units and not. We do anticipate next year in this session of a bond bill. A housing bond bill was passed. It's a 5-year bond bill typically, and it's about 77% exhausted right now. And we anticipate that this bond bill will be filed by the administration. Typically the way it would work is this bill would move through the administration and then come to the bonding committee, the housing committee, for additional possibly policy that will be part of it in the vehicle, but also to recapitalize a lot of housing projects throughout the Commonwealth. Last year's housing bond bill was about 5 years ago's housing bond bill, which is almost exhausted now, was about $2.2 billion. We anticipate that will be a little bit bigger. But I think it's good to talk about it a little bit now, just so if the town of Chelmsford has some particular infrastructural or policy issues they would like to see in that bond bill, I think now would be a good time for, appropriate committees and the board to think about that.
You mentioned, I'm weaving in a question here, you mentioned the housing for those in greatest need. And as you're probably aware, the town of Chelmsford has stepped forward in recent years with community teamwork and others, and we've been sheltering folks over, individuals at the Best Western.
And Concord now.
In Concord, but now we were visited last week by a state inspector with our inspectors at the former Radisson Hotel. And the state is seeking to utilize every room in that former hotel, all 81 rooms, for family sheltering. The owner was there and so forth, and that's now being evaluated, and because of the dire state need, we anticipate it will become a reality. And we know the state provides funding for schools in terms of the impact for transportation and in the school system. What I'm hearing from my public safety chiefs is, what about the additional impact in terms of community response from police and fire? Because right now, as I mentioned at the Best Western, that's our 5th busiest spot for fire response and medical and police. And again, if we're now going to move 85 families into the Radisson for a foreseeable future, with obviously a change of families, and we know there'll be social services provided for them, by agencies such as Community Teamwork. Is there any consideration for meeting the real cost of the communities to provide public safety and other essential town services? Because it does have an impact. And again, we're not opposing housing, and again, we've shown by our track record how committed we are, and we recognize the challenge. But there doesn't seem to be anything in there that really reflects the cost of the towns to provide the public safety services for those.
Yeah, that's a great point, Paul. And, we have to look at it this way, too, is by statute, by Massachusetts statute, we have to protect families.
Right.
Families in need that need housing, we have to. So I think sometimes people get upset about what kind of families, and that's not the question you're asking, I understand that. This is not exactly, the greatest process. This is a desperate process. This is a process to protect people. We've had a number of individuals that were refugees from war-torn countries that have come to Devons, to come to the Radisson and other areas. But I think that's a legit question. It's a legit point. The fact that any exterior costs or costs to the town that are affecting housing and protecting the people the town should be compensated by the Commonwealth if the Commonwealth is going to step up in the other spaces and do that as well. So I agree with that, and I'll bring that to the Secretary's attention when I meet with him this week.
Thank you.
There were also a few things, guys. I just jotted a few things down.
Sure.
Expansion of the bottle bill.
Yeah, for nip bottles and such, yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
who brought that up. Oh, okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, sure. That's a piece of legislation, I think Representative Marjorie Decker filed that, and that's in the Environmental Committee currently.
No, that's
Is
in my committee.
Oh, it's in your TUE. Okay. It's in TUE right now.
So
I think you could
will
speak to
be-
that, Senator, right?
Well, thank you. And by the way, I just want to second your comments, Jim, with respect to housing. You're doing a great job there. And I appreciate that you're being confronted with, as we all are, but you're on the front lines of solving some problems that are that none of us expected to be this serious. So thank you for the work that you're doing there. I expect that an expanded bottle bill, definitely it will be heard this year. And I think I'm cautiously optimistic that it did move out of it did not move out of either branch last time around, although it did get an affirmative from my committee. House and Senate members supported it. So I would expect the committee to support the expanded bottle bill again. And this time I think the concept is going to have legs. This whole question of waste reduction and encouragement of a circular economy is much stronger now even than it was 12 months ago. The reason that the Climate Committee has the bill is because these plastics are all petrochemical products. They contribute to emissions that we now need to bring down, and reuse and reduction thus become very, very important. So I think an expanded bottle bill has legs this time around. I'm cautiously optimistic. You can never predict what the ultimate outcome is going to be. It's hard to create a new law, but I think this thing has momentum.
So Senator, can you explain what expanded means? I mean, is that
It-
water bottles and,
Yeah, well, yes. So right now, we're talking primarily about aluminum cans. There are bills to expand the charge imposed on containers to include everything from nip bottles, the small bottles that sometimes proliferate around outside liquor stores, to, yes, energy drinks, water drinks. I mean, the ubiquitous Poland Spring plastic bottle is not subject to the bottle law right now. We'd also like to increase the deposit on this expanded universe of containers from a nickel to a dime. The idea is to really begin to feed a waste stream, the recycling waste stream, which took a hit 3 or 4 years ago when China in particular changed its practices and stopped accepting recycled materials and waste from outside the country there. The recycling business is starting to rebound. So there's some expanded uses being found for not only for cardboard, which has always been high value, but for many of these petrochemical-based products. So it's a good time to expand the bottle bill and to begin to ride what I hope is going to be a rebound in terms of interest in recycling.
Can I add to that, Senator? And thank you. That's good sort of description of where we're at. I was going to ask the Senator as well, if you recall the years that we've served Chelmsford together, I'm thinking maybe 10 years ago, we used to hear a little bit more about the economic impact on the border communities. But I will say I haven't seen a lot of empirical data, or I haven't seen a lot from the business lobby on that issue. Not to say it isn't there, and not to say we wouldn't always move forward with a sort of a cautious approach. But would that be true, Senator? Have you noticed that we haven't heard that argument like we have in the past?
Boy, that's a great point, Jim. One of two things is going on, and I guess we'll find out this year which predominates. Either the concerns have really subsided, and the priority around recycling and around reducing waste is now so powerful that the business community is willing to abide an expanded bill, or the issue simply hasn't made the big time yet. The test will be when either the House or the Senate passes an expanded bottle bill and the business community realizes that this time may be for real. It will be interesting, I agree with you, to see whether resistance then crops back up, or instead whether the sensitivity about reducing petrochemicals, even in inert products, is now just, there's just heightened. Embedded carbon is another buzzword that I'm hearing from constituents about. We focused on the climate emissions that represented in fuels, the fuels to heat your house, run your business, or for that matter, to power your car. But well beyond fuels is this whole question of the carbon intensity of concrete and the need to go to lower carbon construction materials. That whole idea of thinking about all the energy that gets poured into the stuff we use every day, and it sits there after having been created in a very energy intensive fashion. Now there's a lot of attention being paid to lowering the carbon content of construction materials and everyday objects. So the bottle bill is kind of surfing that renewed interest in ways to ultimately decarbonize industry. That's what we're talking about, decarbonizing manufacturing.
A couple of my other notes here, I'm just going to go through with the slide. For the board asked me, and then we'll, require appliance recycling by appliance. Is that you, Pat, as well? And I know that the senator would probably be better at this question, but I'll add a few things. And this is about when there's appliances and the cost of the recycling, or where do you recycle them, or does you would rather require the
The manufacturer.
manufacturer to-
I thought a few years ago there was a bill that came forward, and I know it didn't go anywhere, that basically said that the manufacturers had to do like a one-for-one. They had to agree to take the old appliance and recycle everything from it appropriately when they brought one.
There
new
is a
in.
mass save program, which is about $75, up to a $75 rebate, which is, not a ton of money, but that is there as well. And I also found the contactless pickup through Mass Save, and I can provide you with the information on that. And that's another sort of resource that can save consumers some money. But I talked also to the Retailers Association today, and they didn't have a specific bill unless the senator knows about that. There wasn't a specific bill.
Yeah, Jim, give me I want to make sure I speak to the topic area that you're referencing right now.
There no pending legislation to require sellers of appliances to take back for recycling purposes. As of right now, I saw nothing on that.
Yeah. Well, in a broader way, there's legislation that would touch on that. There's this concept of extended producer responsibility, right? EPR. And it's a big deal in Maine, where manufacturers of appliances and all kinds of other consumer goods have to start being responsible for the downstream uses of the product, and ultimately the downstream ending of the product. So they're starting in Maine. There is a very, very concerted effort to track products. They could include appliances over their entire life cycle, and then to ask the question: what happens when the consumer gets rid of the product? Who pays when that thing goes into a landfill? The idea of requiring the original manufacturer to take responsibility over this extended life cycle of a consumer good is that the producer then starts to think about reducing his own burden or its own burden, right? You start to substitute biodegradable materials. You start to substitute materials that can be reused in some way if they don't biodegrade. So I am seeing extended producer responsibility legislation materialize. I'm not sure, but I think Representative Sokolow may have a bill. She's the head of the Zero Waste Caucus, a very important leader in your branch, Jim, and your branch, Representative Elliott. So these extended producer responsibility laws probably touch on the kind of appliances you're talking about, although they also touch on much more.
To expand on that just a little bit, I'd also like to see them touch on the expected life of these appliances, because as we all know, these appliances are they're not lasting 20 and 25 years anymore, they're lasting 5. And
You're
so now
right.
the rotation of these appliances, whether it's them taking them back or us putting them in a landfill, is multiplied by 3 and 4 times as to the same amount of time that ones that we used to get 20 years ago would last. So that really needs to be addressed, because it's not responsible in any way.
Yeah. Well, so the way I would approach this.
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So with the way that I would approach this would be, so why don't we provide the board with some of the resources, some of what the Zero Waste Caucus has in terms of legislation that might touch on this. And if you feel as though it's not satisfying that, we can look into something that you might want to file, Pat, individually, or something the board is interested in the future. Be happy to do that.
Perfect, thanks.
Great.
Okay.
You're going to go to the motor
One
vehicle
last-
excise?
I have the last one on here is the vehicle excise tax schedule. Rodney? So, Select Board Member Wojcik, your concern was that the vehicles last longer now. And so the schedule was year of manufacture was like 90%, second year 60%, third year 40, fourth year 25, fifth year 10. So if your idea is that these cars last longer.
Yes.
Was the town recouping money? And they should be if you change the schedule.
Exactly, especially given what Mr. Latina just told us about. a little
Well,
while
I
ago.
thought that was staged. No, you didn't plant. Okay. So there was no specific legislation that I had seen. I don't know if Representative, you had seen anything, or Senator, you had seen anything on changing. You want to talk a little bit about your kind of your perspective
Well,
on this?
just what you said. I mean, you know, a car these days doesn't reduce in value that quickly.
Yeah.
And
Lasts a lot longer.
Right, and people are keeping their cars so much longer, so many more years is at that lowest rate, when if that rate were changed a little bit, so it didn't go down so quickly, the town would get more money from excise tax, because that's our, you know, after real estate taxes, that's our biggest source of revenue in town.
Well, you know, if I could interpose, I don't know the answer here, but and perhaps the reps do. The used car market has been very healthy, as we all know, especially in the last year and a half. There was a time, especially when new vehicles just weren't available, and they're still very hard to come by, when the used vehicle, the value just went sky high. I hope that the town is going to see a bump in terms of its excise tax, because the value of used vehicles and the cost of buying one, by the way, has been pretty precious over the course of the last 18 months. So is there some way that the increased value of used cars is being reflected in a bounce in terms of excise tax collections
If
for
anything, it's the other
Chelmsford?
way
No,
around.
that's exactly the thing. The value of any vehicle is based on the original manufacturer suggested retail price as new. So if you have a 6-year-old vehicle that's worth $30,000, or whatever it could be, you're still only paying 10% of the original MSRP from the 5th year onward. So regardless
Well,
of what
that's
the used market
interesting.
is. Right.
Yeah,
It's not tied to sales price.
I got you.
And so that's the concern, is that it's the law probably hasn't changed in decades, which doesn't reflect the increased use of vehicles that are now going hundreds of thousands of miles, whereas back when some of us were younger, you know, people were getting rid of cars at 60, 70,000 miles.
We still have our refrigerators.
Still have the refrigerators.
I buy mine at 60.
Right, but now it's, you know, and I think that's the concern, is the depreciation schedule doesn't really match in any means, the value of the vehicle.
Has this conversation been in this sort of MMA space?
No, I've not
Okay.
heard it there either.
All right.
How
So
does our schedule compare to
It's
other?
It's
the same.
statewide, it's a statewide
Well, what
schedule.
about to other states?
Oh, I don't know, if there's
Similar?
about other states.
They might not even get excise
I don't know.
tax.
Sometimes it's property tax, it's different in different states, you know.
Yeah.
we'll be happy to do more research on it.
Schedule.
Be happy to do that and come back and see if there's been anything proposed in previous legislative sessions, or to your point, Aaron, other states that have done it. I think that's logical.
What may be quicker, if you could help, is Chapter 90 funding. It happens every spring. The House passes the bill, the Senate passes the bill, and then it dies. And then sometime around late June or July, we get it released, when half the construction season is over. And I know you don't want to do a 2-year bill, which would solve problem every other year, but is there any way of getting the monies released timely, more timely, I guess, because it just seems like it just gets carried then into the tide when everything gets resolved at the, July timeframe?
I don't have the exact answer for that, but I've certainly heard more from my towns about it this last 2 years, and there's been a lot. Things have certainly been slowed down, if you will, because of other factors the last couple of years, which backed up a lot of different vehicles through the legislative process. We'll bring that back. I can talk to Chair Strauss and see what his schedule is, this upcoming year. And
Because I don't even think it's been sent to conference committee at this
Not
point.
yet.
No, and that's it seems like, well, I'm not going to.
I know.
But
I know. I understand the
It's just
frustration.
disappointing,
Certainly.
because not only was it level funded, then it was delayed in its release, and I think that's been the frustrating part.
I agree with you, Mr. Manager. having my municipal hat on for 24 years, understanding the importance of Chapter 90, and I think all of us, Senator Barrett, Representative Arcero, myself, Representative Cataldo, we certainly urged for additional funding. I was hopeful that the MMA request of $600 million would be approved, but before us, lo and behold, is the 200 plus the 200. The governor has filed, I believe, a supplemental that is still languishing, if you will, in the process with additional funding for communities. The lion's share of that is, of course, for the MBTA and bridges and such, but I think that's another opportunity for funds. We all know one of the priorities of people in all of our communities is the condition of the roads. So we'll continue to advocate
It's the
for
biggest
additional
complaint,
funding.
it's the biggest complaint we get locally.
As
the
well as
roads.
processing at an earlier time frame. So,
Thank you. And then, so maybe sort of an exit question. You mentioned about emissions, and Senator Barrett and Representatives PFAS. And I know it was on the list.
It's on my list.
It's obviously, in our case, it's affecting the water districts, it's affecting the town, which is actually doing a remediation of our former DPW yards. And then obviously the new federal standards that are coming, it sort of goes to the bigger issue of how do, you said earlier, communities need to provide additional housing, we need to provide additional energy infrastructure, and we have limited school space and so forth, but how do we absorb these costs and function? Because it's not a question of not wanting to meet the needs of clean water or expanded school space or additional housing infrastructure, but if we don't have the sewer capacity and we don't have the water, then, like you said, those efforts get frustrated.
Yeah, and especially,
PFAS in this case is the big topic of the day right now.
It is, and more communities are aware of just how dangerous it is for individuals and how it affects communities. I know in Littleton, last year they constructed a new water treatment plant, with infrastructure money and getting some low interest loans from SRF. We provided in the economic development bill last session $250,000 for Chelmsford, specific to the remediation of PFAS. But that certainly is not a long-term solution. They're currently, by Representative Kate Hogan, who's the Speaker Pro Tem, is created a subcommittee specific to this, and they are meeting and looking towards guidelines, et cetera, to a more omnibus bill to help cities and towns. So we can go back to the Speaker Pro Tem and find out what the latest process is for that committee and where they're going.
Well, years ago, and I know Representative Trahan's aide is on the call, the federal money was in. That's how towns built sewer, was through federal. You probably remember that, Representative, when we were both younger, and in the city, those phases of sewer were mostly federal monies. And obviously, we're now coming full circle with the limited capacity of the wastewater facilities like Duck Island and Lowell, and the aging infrastructure, and then now you've got that on top of this with the PFAS challenge.
Yeah, I can appreciate that because gateway cities, and it's not just inherent in Massachusetts, it's across the country where we're still dealing with combined sewer overflow costs. And it's clearly, it's an unfunded mandate as well as, PFAS. I appreciate the fact that the federal government is finally going to complete the rulemaking process and establish standards. But it has also sent a sense of panic throughout communities on how to deal with it, particularly how to fund it. The levels that are being proposed are important from an environmental and health perspective. However, we're talking in the hundreds of billions of dollars throughout this country to fix it, and it really is. Communities cannot afford it. We're still struggling. The city of Lowell has spent in excess of $150 million just to separate. I believe we're at 3% of our sewers, so it has to be affordable, and the federal government inevitably is going to have to step up and provide that funding to water districts across the country. So I myself have a bill, and Representative Arcero described it well. There's dozens of bills on PFAS, from banning it to how do we pay for it? How do we help communities? And the state can't do it alone, quite frankly, but it's coming, and it's coming fast. So I think, that along with the lines of affordability, the House has taken steps and approved, and Senator Barrett perhaps can speak to the Senate budget to make those issues that we're talking about affordability with, this doubling the circuit breaker for senior citizens from 12 to 2,400, increasing rental deductions from 3 to 4,000. Clearly Representative Sarah talked about housing, but the House budget proposes over $500 million for RAFT and for homeless families, families in transition. I think you raised a good point about public service and those costs. We know what the answer will be. Unrestricted local aid was increased from up to 1.25 billion, an increase of 19.7 million. Still an increase, as well as your Chapter 70. This is unprecedented level for education, an additional almost 600 million. So, there's we hear the concerns from municipalities. I think the Cherish Act, the Millionaires Tax, the billion that's anticipated will grow. I think there are differences between the House and the Senate on, how that's going to be spent. But when we talk about Chapter 90 and roads and money for roads and bridges repairs, that's all in conference now. There are some differences between the Senate and the House. So, as we move forward, my colleagues, the veterans, they know better when this should be adopted, will be adopted, but we'll continue to, support and advocate for these things that municipalities certainly need.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I want to second Rodney's point. Jim and Simon and Rod and I have been working hard on a host of issues. Another one worth mentioning, because it's of interest, I know, to people in town, is childcare. We hear from so many parents, dads as well as moms, that they're working from home in many cases, but not everyone can work from home. The cost of childcare is sky high and go up because childcare workers themselves need to be well paid. That's becoming a huge affordability issue for households where both parents do work, and where I think both branches are very interested in addressing the childcare issue and the early childhood ed issue, which is really one and the same. So I'm pleased at what the House members of the Chelmsford delegation are doing, and I'm trying to do my part on the Senate side too.
Yeah, it's follow up, Senator. Not to mention the cost of higher education, and meanwhile, at the same time, can you make the state competitive with other states by doing tax reform? And I think that's sort of the challenge. Is you now have the federal government sort of hamstrung by this debt ceiling agreement that's going to limit their availability. You're pressured to make the state competitive with other states in terms of taxes like the estate tax and tax burden. But on the other hand, you've got all these other needs and.
I
guess that's why you go to the State House every morning to figure that out.
We want to make community college free, beginning at least with people age 25 and above, but hopefully extending to everyone who wants to extend the high school education, either because they're older or coming right out of high school. So there is this, and then you've got an economy which is less certain than it was 2 years ago. We still don't quite know what we're doing with this current inflationary spiral. We don't know if the Federal Reserve is going to bring it under control or not. We obviously got to monitor state finances in a way that we didn't worry about when there was COVID or pandemic era money pouring in from the federal side, and when the state economy was holding up surprisingly well. So there's a little more uncertainty in terms of what we're facing. And there's this desire to reduce higher ed costs and early childhood costs for families. I hope that remains a priority and that we give it every penny that can be spared.
You always look at it like this too. the budget, $52 billion, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But 2/3 of it are obligatory spending. 40% of it is healthcare. Then there's, education, there's MBTA, there's bonding obligations. So then it's the fight for everything that's left. And so to your point, Paul, there certainly is a lot of cost. And I think also coming out of the pandemic, not this community, not my communities, thank you, but there's communities throughout the Commonwealth, I think, that with the ARPA money that they received, there was kind of a feeling that money will be around all the time. And things change pretty quickly. And to the senator's point, there's always that concern. A lot of members on this board we went through the subprime mortgage together. And that was one of the worst economic situations in 75 years till we hit the pandemic. So we always have to be vigilant about the budget and how things can change in a dime, so.
Mr. Chair, I just had one other update. At the Vinyl Square Strategic Planning Committee meeting with Select Board Timmons last week, one of the items was the boat ramp that I had sent a letter when I first got on it. It was back in February to then Commissioner Ron Amadon. There is now a new commissioner, so I sent an email to set up another meeting with the new commissioner to get a little bit better of a handle on the time frame for the design and permitting and planning of that boat ramp. So I will let you know, Mr. Manager and Select Board Member Timmons, when I do get a response back from the new commissioner's office, and we can get the appropriate parties there.
And with that, we'll furnish the committee with our homework assignments and go from there.
Do we have
Could
a date?
Yeah, we just wanted to add that we love having you here so much. We
Awesome.
were looking at Monday, November 20th to do this again.
Okay.
If you guys could mark your calendars.
We will do that.
I don't think I have a lot of obligations on Monday, November free.
That was our hope.
Just getting ready for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, well, yeah. Not the night before Thanksgiving. That might be a difficult night.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for coming. Of
course.
Thanks, folks. Good for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, public hearings. We have a National Grid and Verizon poll petition for Acton Road. Is there someone here that's,
Online, I think.
I think so too.
Sam and Alexander.
Yes, hello.
Would you like to give us some background on this application?
Yes. So this application is for a new pole set, pole 70-50 on Acton Road.
Could you please give us your name?
Yes, my name is Alexander Mutz.
Thank you.
So this is going to be a new pole set on Acton Road, pole 70-50. The purpose of this new pole is we are going to be installing a feeder monitor for this circuit. What this is going to allow National Grid to do is monitor the voltage, the current, and the load of the circuit and better improve reliability in this area.
You have any idea how long this project is going to take, sir?
I think this is, once the project has approval, it's a pretty, I'd say it's a pretty fast acting project. It's only going to be a few poles that are going to be acted on. So I don't know exactly when they're going to start construction on it, but it's not going to be a long project.
What do you consider a long project? I'm not trying to be wise. I've had four inquiries from a couple of businesses out there and a couple of, it is a very dangerous road as well. So I'm sure the police will be able to help you there. But, there were a couple of business people were concerned about, was it going to shut their business down? I mean, is it going to be a 4 or 5 day project, a week, or a couple of days? Or
So for the businesses in the area, this shouldn't actually affect their power. What they do when they do a project like this, they keep the whole line energized while they're working on it, and they'll set the new pole and they'll just transfer the live wires onto it. So there shouldn't be any need for an outage. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be. It's just they try to do this while the whole line is energized. And for hours, I'm pretty sure this project has a scope of around 200 man hours, and that's split amongst 4 or 5 crews.
Well, it wasn't voltage as much as I was concerned about was the, it's a very dangerous road. I don't know if you're aware of it or not, and it's a very
Yes.
dangerous part of that road, so.
Yeah, so what they would do is they'd probably, while they're working on it, they'd probably block just one lane. So it would not close the road down. It would at most be a single lane closure.
So you're talking probably a solid week at least?
I can't say for sure. It depends on how many crews they put on the job.
In your estimate of when this project would begin?
It depends on approval for this. Once we have approval for this, we can really start scheduling the crews, and they put it on the schedule for work. I couldn't tell you an exact date right now.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions regarding this application?
Does this create more double poles?
So for this particular one, they are only going to be installing a new pole. There's going to be no double pole for this particular petition.
And you have a lot of underground, you have some underground work being done as well? Is that what you're gonna do, is maybe even reduce a pole or two and go underground with some of the?
Not for this project. This one is just going to be installing new equipment on that new pole.
Oh, 'cause I thought whatever. Yeah,
I think
thought the
it always
agenda
says,
said-
it always says that wording, George, about the underground
Okay.
stuff. so.
Because the agenda did say about underground, whatever. All right, thank you, sir.
Yeah, no problem.
Do you want to, does anybody from the board have anything before you open a public hearing?
Well, it's already open.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Opening, Brian Latina, Precinct 9 Town Meeting Rep, and 15 Jesse Road's my address. Regarding double poles, we've got an awful lot of them in town. We do have a town bylaw that was passed years ago. There's a $300 fine to National Grid or Verizon or whoever owns the pole when there's a double pole out there, when the Board of Selectmen decides to do it. I don't believe we've ever charged them that, but if you would encourage them to take these things down at the rate that they put them up,
Yeah.
that would be helpful.
I think
And
they just said this wasn't going to be a double pole.
understood, but right outside the building here, we have double poles
Okay,
that
but
block
let's
view.
stick with this topic,
Understood.
please.
The topic is poles. The
Well, the
tradition.
topic is actually this application, so
The
we're
tradition
trying to stick with
for the
this.
select board in the past was, if you don't allow the application for a particular poll, this one's probably critical, but if you don't allow the application, it encourages these folks to take the dang things down. The other approach is to cut them so there's only 4 feet of pole up top. So the pole, for visibility purposes and safety, is now no longer an issue.
Okay.
And the other topic is, of course, taking the bittersweet vines out of them. And for the purpose of the senator that was here, number 21, pole 21 on Turnpike Road has bittersweet. If it rains properly and that vine goes a little bit farther, you're going to electrocute somebody.
Okay, we just want to stick with this application. Are there any other questions specific to this application? The board? Okay, take a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion that we close this public hearing.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
I'll make a motion that we approve petition number 307-44918 for the poll petition for Acton Road.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Okay. Licenses. Entertainment license for Press Cafe. Is there someone here for that?
I don't see anyone.
No.
They may have dropped off. The request is simply to allow outdoor entertainment in front of Press Cafe. It's no modification of anything inside the building and really nothing on the outside seating. It's just, in order for them to have somebody out there playing, they need an entertainment license from the board as indicated in their application. And it's been reviewed by the town's departments with no concerns. And obviously, there's no noise considerations, even though they will be subject to the noise bylaw, because it's obviously next to the highway and in 129. So we've not received any objections to this request.
So they're not going to lose any seats because
No.
of this?
No.
Are they gonna increase their drinking outside or something? I mean-
No, they already have outdoor seating out there on the patio. So they just, I think they've been so successful, they really just want to now provide some entertainment outdoors for those who are dining. And when the weather was nicer the last couple of weeks, it is amazing how many people are sitting outside on the tables out there. So I can, see their thinking on this case. But
Any other questions?
So their license is from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. with no alcohol served before 8 a.m. or 10 a.m. On weekdays and weekends, Sundays. And I guess the question that I had, it wasn't clear to me that it was just for the outdoors. I thought they just said first floor or something like that. But regardless, that no one sees any issue with like noise levels at 9:30, 10 at night.
no,
Are
We
there any
didn't get any-
residences?
there's really no residents in that area.
Yeah.
Behind them is like swamp
Yeah, that,
in the farm, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, so there's, you can see,
think it's
it's
just in this
shown
area.
there, that they're out there,
saw that.
Yeah.
there's nothing out there, so, if there were, I'm sure we could address it, they could address it, but there've been no concerns, and there's really no residential
I don't know if
housing
there's
nearby.
any random houses
No.
around there. There's nothing.
So if they, and I don't expect
You-
to, but if by chance we wind up with noise complaints, I know that would first be addressed with the Chelmsford
Right.
Police.
Yeah.
And then if it was unresolvable, does it come back to
Yeah,
us?
well, yeah, because you'll be issuing a license annually, so they'll be back before you in November.
Yeah,
in a
so
matter of a few months. If
Can
they were
test drive
concerned.
it for a few
Yep.
months before then?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Give it the
you.
summer, yeah. Take a motion, if there's no other discussion.
This isn't a public hearing.
This isn't a public hearing.
Okay. Handicap access. They are.
I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the entertainment license, new entertainment license for Press Cafe at 330 Billerica Road.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Okay, next one is a one-day beer and license, House Beer Brewing, Weston Nursery, 160 Pine Hill Road.
Yeah, Jim Connolly.
Hi, could you give us your name and address?
I'm Jim Conley. I'm the manager at Weston Nurseries in Chelmsford. On Friday, we are planning an event, and we would like to get a permit to have a beer vendor at the event. Weston Nurseries has been in Chelmsford since 2011, but the company itself is 100 years old this year. So every location is going to be having a big event, planning for a number of customers to attend, to thank them for their past business, and Peter Mezit, Karen Mezit, and Wayne and who are fourth generation, and Wayne and Beth Mezit, who are third generation, will be coming. We plan on having a food truck, an ice cream truck, and we are planning on having a scavenger hunt. The a cappella group is coming to perform at Chelmsford High. A cappella group is coming to perform at 4 o'clock for us as well. So there's going to be a lot of good community involvement. We do plan on having a police detail for the event as well to help with parking.
Okay, any questions from the board? Take a motion.
I'll make a motion. that we-
And, oh, by the way, we would like to have everybody from the board come if they'd like to visit as well. Sorry.
Sounds like fun.
Thank you. I'll make a motion that we approve a one-day beer and wine license for Western Nurseries for, what's the date? For June 9th, 2023, as presented.
Second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Thanks, and have a good one. Have a
Thank
good
you.
celebration. That sounds fun.
It does. Hopefully it doesn't rain.
Okay, next up is a one-day all-alcoholic beverage license for the American Legion, Post 313, Groton Road.
Good evening.
Name and address, please.
Dan Vigent, American Legion, Post 313 Commander, 3 Charles Gate Road, Chelmsford, Massachusetts.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to give us some background, or?
Hi, I'm Phil Hamilton, Senior Commander of Post 313.
And Al Riccio, General Manager of Post 313.
Okay.
We're just requesting our one-day liquor license for our annual block party held behind our building on Willis Drive.
Okay.
You're gonna shut down Willis, you're gonna shut down Willis Drive that day?
Yes, just from the beginning to the end of our building, so there'll still be access through the top lot.
Yep.
We have ample parking in the top area as well as overflow parking at the Chelmsford Senior Center.
Any other questions?
No.
Take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve a one-day all-alcohol beverage to the American Legion for June 17, 2023.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. 5-0. Thanks. Have a good.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
And last on the licenses, one-day beer and wine license, St. John the Evangelist, African Community, Middlesex Street.
There may not be anybody.
Here, yeah.
Sometimes, like St. Martin's, they don't come for everyone.
Yeah, they do
Okay.
these a lot.
Is there anything, any questions anybody has in particular for this?
For a Father's Day reception, yeah.
No.
Okay, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve a one-day beer and wine license for St. John's the Evangelist Church for June 18, 2023, as presented.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Okay, next, reports and presentations. DPW Director Christine Clancy.
Good evening, members of the board. This is the monthly ARPA update.
Bless you.
So just to give a quick overview before we get to the spreadsheet, so we have a total of $7.9 million currently allocated in ARPA funds. So as of this month, we've procured 5.8 million of that, which is about 75% of the total amount that has been allocated. Also tracking the amount that has been invoiced or spent. So of the 5.8 million, the 63% of that total amount of projects have been invoiced and spent. We also are tracking where projects fall in terms of anticipated overruns or underruns. And so right now, if you add up all the 46 projects, there's potentially a $750,000 overrun anticipated. It's more detailed in the spreadsheet. And that has reduced from last month. We do track it monthly. And so as projects are finalizing, that number is more refined. Last month, we were tracking about $853,000. So this still leaves about $2.68 million, well, if you take away the, so the 2.68 million includes the overrun too, but we still have unallocated ARPA funds. Before we get into the spreadsheet, I just want to go over or actually maybe if we just go over to the spreadsheet in the next slide, please. So this is the monthly spreadsheet that's been updated. The spreadsheet has a detail for each of the 46 projects. I think I want to focus on the projects that are highlighted in blue or yellow are procured, blue being completed projects, the green being procured but still in process or construction. The yellow are partially procured. The projects that are in red are where we really want to focus because that's where procurement has not been completed. So I'm just going to go over some of these items, not to go over all 46. So 1B, the HVAC, mechanical HVAC support for the next 3 fiscal years. Right now, we have an on-call contract that expires this June, so we have an on-call contract out to have support for 3 days, up to 3 days in our schools and our buildings. So that project is out to bid, and we anticipate we'll open the bids mid-June, so awarding hopefully by the end of the month. Another update is on number 3, the modular RTU replacements at McCarthy in Parker. That bid opening is scheduled for for June 7th. And then number 15, the senior center HVAC system construction bid documents are being prepared for a mid-June bid date. So that is, I think, one of the largest projects that remain to be procured. Also combining projects numbers 14, 17, and 20, 17 through 20. These are the testing and balancing HVAC system projects. Right now, so we did obtain a quote to design, basically put together a design for one design for all these projects. That cost estimate came in at over $30,000. It was actually close to $50,000. And under Chapter 7 MGL, Chapter 7C, we have to seek proposals from a design consultant. So we're putting that out right now to procure a designer, and then we'll go from there and issue bid documents. So I do see that as being one of the last projects to procure. And then also, just to kind of jump to I didn't write the number, but the Kensington Pump Station, I want to say it's like number 30, it's in the 30s. That project, as presented in our recent capital improvement plan, that project we know is a much larger amount than we estimate here. We have a $250,000 allocation. The remaining balance would be funded through capital or through other means. But we are moving forward this summer with procuring some of the components. We've already procured some minor items like generators, but we're moving forward with procuring I call like the shed or the house that is that we put that up first, and then that project will not be completed until next year. But moving forward with at least the allocations in the ARPA funds. That's the highlights from last month. We still have some more projects to complete, as you can see, especially in the yellow and the red. But we are getting close to having most of these procured. Any questions?
I think it's great progress. There's still enough red and yellow that we need to let it ride a little longer before we know what our balance is that we have left to be allocated, is what I'm taking away from this.
Sure. Well, I think that, so a lot of the red that is left is the senior center the senior center is one of the largest dollar values too. Mm-hmm. So that we'll know. I would say we go to bid mid-June. That has a filed sub-bid, so that will probably be in July. I guess we're pretty confident in the pricing of that, but that is the largest one to procure. And then I would say 14, 17 through 20 look like a lot, but it's as one project.
Yeah, it's 140.
So I think it is a little deceiving when you look at this page. And then number 1B, it's also a large project, is the on-call support for the next 3 years. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I do agree there's still some work to do, but I guess what I don't see right now is that so there's still $2.68 million unallocated. I don't see that, like, I don't see that we need it right now. That's where I think if you look at the month to month where we're tracking overruns, it's kind of gone up a little, down a little, between like $700,000 and $900,000. I don't see that going to $2 million. I see that it has been pretty, staying pretty much the same.
So do you expect that 14, 17 through 20 will be what we see still in red in July?
So we're putting together, right, so we're putting together the design, so I think that we're putting the design documents, procuring design, going out to bid. So I think we're trying to see if and that should be a pretty quick design and bid process. So I think by the end of July, we should start to see more red. Okay. But that's the last of it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, great. We got the sewer inflow.
All right, so I wanted to provide an update on the sewer. So as you know, we do track our monthly sewer flows, and in recent years, we've been overcapacity, and that really is tied to, we do see a correlation between the rainfall that we receive yearly, especially going back a few years ago, we were above capacity. And from there, we had a sewer moratorium, and now we have really, right now, a sewer restriction policy, and that policy has been updated this past fall. And also, we went through and completed an initial inspection of our system, about 12% of our system, and what we look for is infiltration or inflow. So infiltration is when you have water coming into the pipes, typically through holes or through joints, and then the other source of water that could be in your system is inflow, and that's where water is introduced into the system through pipes, like through people's sump pumps, through roof leaders, and so we have looked to see how we can remove infiltration from the system. And so looking at the initial assessment we did identify some work we can do within our main, and that's presented just briefly in this memo. Within our mains, we have infiltration in manholes. We have some in our pipes, but it's not cost effective to reduce it. So we're looking at maybe doing lining of manholes to reduce the infiltration within our manholes. The next step is to look at inflow, and inflow that's coming into our system. And so that's where this is the program where we are piloting a private inflow removal program. So we have a state earmark in the amount of $105,000 to conduct a pilot private inflow removal program. And this is, since we see that correlation between rainfall and higher flows, we know that there's, whether it be infiltration or inflow, we know that it's out there. So this program is to help to start to begin to create a program where we could allow private property inflow that is connected to the sewer, which is not allowed, but we know it's happening, to be removed from the system. Other communities have done this, and it is really, because if we remove the capacity from the sewer, that will provide capacity ability for other economic growth or other uses, whether it be commercial or residential. Right now, proposing just for commercial. So here you can see these are just some examples of private inflow, what it looks like. The pilot is geared towards residential. I think what we did is what DPW did is we initially took a look at throughout town, looking at where we have the lowest elevations in town and also adjacent to wetlands. So we have a database of about 400 properties all around town. We will be doing a targeted mailing to those properties, but we also will be putting up a news flash or information on our website. Really, anyone that has a sump pump that is connected to the sewer can participate in this program. We're hiring a consultant to assist with this program. The plan is so we're reaching up to 400. We don't know that these 400 people have sump pumps. We just are figuring that people that have sump pumps are likely in the lower elevation areas. So we're hopeful to have about 70 inspections, and from there the consultant will do the inspections, detailed inspections, and also come up with estimated amount of removal if we were to remove that sump pump and reconnect it to a storm drain or some other out to if there is an opportunity to recharge it more locally into the ground, and also what's that estimated cost. And then from there, we would, go on to the next steps. Right now, like I said, we have infiltration identified in our system. So from that initial assessment, we estimated about 30,000 gallons that we can remove from the system. And we right now have businesses coming before us to try to, or as development projects, commercial development projects. So we have, I guess, a plan in place, and we will be editing the sewer credit transfer policy memo. Policy to reflect this change, so people can continue to move forward on projects that just recent projects that are going forward. We want to continue to build this capacity or removal, and this is the next step. And so the timeline would be this summer to hopefully have the inspections complete, and then we would have an assessment and ability to move forward with a listing of inflow projects and the next, I guess, bank putting into the sewer credit transfer policy. Any questions? I guess, so right now, if people are asking how they sign up, that's we're building that right now. So it will be a targeted mailing, but we also will be putting information on our DPW website, and that will be shared through social media and other sources. So right now, people can't go to our website to sign up, but that is forthcoming very, very soon, hopefully in the next week or so.
If there's a sump pump feeding into the sewer system, where do you feed it now? Is it somewhere out on the owner's property, hopefully in an area where the water doesn't come right back again?
So we will look to see if there's an opportunity to connect it into a catch basin potentially, or the drained stormwater, if there is a stormwater infrastructure on the street. The other option is to have it drain out into the yard to locally recharge. That is another, but we also have to look to see where groundwater is in some of these areas and if that's feasible. So, I mean, and that is, I guess this is a program, a pilot to build to see what's the cost, what's the feasibility. Other communities have done this. I know that, some similar program that we're looking at is Burlington's done this. I know Cambridge has, and so there's other communities that have done some similar programs, and this really is much needed because of our sewer capacity concern or issue.
So can I ask, just for scope, 30,000 gallons per day? I know I've seen recent sewer flow reports, but what is our average?
2.66 million gallons is our flow.
30,000 isn't that much.
Like, as a percentage, is it like?
It's
I'm just to get a scope.
less than 1. I mean, but it's less.
But it's something, yeah.
It's something.
We need everything we can get at this point.
We're able to move forward, and also that's a thing is when people purchase inflow or when they purchase what they need for their project, they're purchasing it 2 to 1. So that 30,000 gallons is really putting 15,000 back into the system in 15. But I can say that we're still. I mean, that is allowing for some projects to move forward, and so. We just need to, what we'll continue to do is look at manholes to see if we can find infiltration, because we were finding most of the infiltration in manholes. So we'll continue to try to find opportunities for infiltration removal, more, again, within the right-of-way. The sump pumps are the other, so it's not just, I think the focus will be sump pumps, but also potentially roof leaders. You can have examples of, catch basins that, if there's a catch basin, private catch basin that connects to the right-of-way, that's another potential option. But I think the focus that we're targeting is sump pumped.
Will this help you in mapping some of those catch basins and stuff also for future?
That's really a separate, so we did talk about that as a good point, is that
while you're doing this.
So we've already kind of started to do that, where we've looked in these areas where we think we're going to target to see what we have for infrastructure. We do have our stormwater system mapped out, but it does need some updating, so a catch basin's here, not 15 feet down the street. So we're trying to, and that's something that with the consultant, they're going to have to vet out each location to see if it's feasible to connect to a catch basin. Because if there isn't infrastructure on the street, then the option is locally recharge. And if that isn't an option, that's something that we have to look at. But we're hopeful that we'll have ability for these sump pumps to be redirected appropriately.
And on a related note, Christine will be back at our next meeting with John Potts and Weston and Sampson about we now have received the final report on the infiltration study, so he'll be presenting that. He was unable to do that this evening, but we'll have it at your next meeting.
Okay. Great. Any other questions?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is adoption of Select Board Public Comment Policy.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, at the board's direction, you have in front of you the public comment policy that was prepared by Town Council Paul Haverty in the wake of what's vernacularly known as the Southborough decision regarding the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court's decision pertaining to public comment at municipal meetings. Council provided a general policy that we've circulated at the direction of the board, to all boards and committees, and I've also sent it to the support staff, if applicable, from the town, to adopt this universally through the town as an informational guideline for committees, so that we not run astray of the Massachusetts State Constitution. And obviously there's still some ambiguity regarding the court decision, as they are with any court decision, but basically what it clarifies is that it reaffirms some of the aspects of the open meeting law, that basically, public comment, it can be directed by the chair in terms of recognizing who speaks, time limits on who speaks, a total time limit, in addition to individual speakers. But it does make clear that, that public comment is available for the public to speak, and it needn't meet the desires or requests for civility and other concerns that were addressed in the court decision. But it does, and it also encourages board members, whether in this board or other committees, to not respond to those questions in public comment, because you don't want to then run astray of the open meeting law in terms of if there are matters that since it was not scheduled for the board to discuss an agenda topic. So what you have before you is the policy that's directed by council, and if the board has any considerations, we can discuss them, or we could have council appear at a subsequent meeting if there are some unresolved concerns.
Any discussion? Any thoughts about this?
I just have a couple related comments, Paul. So I've gotten some feedback that perhaps the policy itself should cite the SJC issue so that that's not lost. There was a very detailed cover letter that accompanied this when you sent it out to the committee and board and commission chairs. And so one suggestion that I have is we have other policies that have appendices, so might we just include that cover letter as an appendix, since it provides far more detail and background for posterity's sake than simply putting a reference into the court case. And that way the context for the policy wouldn't be lost.
Okay.
That's one suggestion that I have. We could just we could vote to amend it to include that cover letter as an appendix.
I don't know if we want to include a reference to the court case.
Well, that's why I'm saying it wouldn't be in the policy itself, but the context for why we did this wouldn't be lost, because we would have that appendix as part of the documentation.
I wonder if that's something we should ask town council. If
So
we
where
should
would
even
the
reference
appendix,
that case.
I don't think we need to talk to the town council about whether having an appendix, but what would you consider where would the appendix be?
We have other policies. The minutes policy has an appendix.
Does it reference case law, though?
It references the Mass General Law.
Yep.
Yeah, it reiterates some of it.
Well, Mass General law is
So,
Mass General law.
That was my only, I thought that was a very good cover email that you sent with this, because I think the concern that was raised to me was, okay, it's 10 years later, and somebody tries to mess with this, but it's tied back to some Supreme Court case, right? And that context gets lost.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to be fair. I paraphrase a lot of what Paul Haverty said in his cover letter to me, so I don't want to,
Yeah.
and so, I don't want to take unwarranted credit for great words.
Well, and the only reason I'm suggesting it too is you've already sent it out to every board and committee, and
Yep.
I don't think we want to try to go backtrack through all of them, but somewhere in the files, I think that cover letter should remain, whether it's with the policy or
Yeah,
in the, just with the policy document or something.
I'd love to see it in the files, because that's what I'm used to seeing.
Right.
Anytime a
I
policy, a
think it
new
should have been
policy
in
is
our
released.
agenda. I was.
Yeah, it's in the files someplace.
Or in our case, where
That's
it's
what
all,
I'm used to,
it's
but-
all online, we really would have to
Right.
put it in there with it, because, it's not a manual file now, it's a online retrievable document, so I think we would just append it to it following that, if that's what the board's seeking.
So this policy, it's going to be a general policy, not necessarily in the select board.
No,
Oh,
this
this
would be a
is for the
select board
select
policy.
board. The vote, the suggestion tonight is that the select board vote to adopt this policy. And so I got Paul's, I don't know if you guys got Paul's letter, but I got it because I'm the chair of another committee. And it explains why we're doing this in very good detail, I thought. And so it requests that every board, commission, and committee adopt their own policy. Because we can't, as a board, force policy on everybody else. So for example,
Particularly elected boards.
the committee that I'm chairing next week, we're gonna vote to adopt this policy in the template that was provided. We just wrote fire station committee instead of select board.
So, okay, so I have some questions then. Okay, so, but like the minutes policy, I mean, that's not in our policies.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it actually is.
It is?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's in
Okay.
section 9.
It's not board specific.
No, it's in section 9
It's a
of our-
select board policy in
Yeah,
the select
it
board
is for
policy
select board.
document.
Okay, I don't remember us putting
Yeah, no,
that
it is.
in
Yeah,
there.
it's just for select board because ours, you
Okay, I
know,
mean, and then secondly, I mean, our policy for policies is to review them once and then vote on them the next meeting, if
Okay.
then.
Yeah, that's fine.
So-
That's what I
so-
expected to do,
But-
actually.
And then, I'm not done. So how about if we integrate this into what we have in the policy right now? I mean, it can even, I mean, I guess we could do it word for word, but to,
Like as a draft.
I
Put it in.
would be more, you mean integrated as a subsection?
no,
Or-
just kind of replace what's there with this.
Yeah, if we can find what we're replacing, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a separate section in there that's just for the open, you know,
Mm-hmm.
as part of the meeting.
For public comment, there's a separate
Public-
section?
Yeah, there is, yeah.
Yes.
I do know that.
So maybe for the next meeting, we could include the cover letter, just so people can see it, this policy and the old policy that we want to replace.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, or how it would be integrated in a
Yeah.
draft,
Okay.
in a draft format, you know, so we could see it.
Just so that it's on the agenda, so it's,
Yeah.
you mean,
And-
yeah,
and-
acceptable.
Town council is scheduled to be here
Yeah.
at the next meeting too, so that's,
May I ask a couple of related questions that came to mind as I was looking at this was, okay, so when a new board or committee is formed, is this going to be in the packet for that new board or committee? There's a packet that the clerk's office gives them. And when a new board member is appointed or a new committee member is appointed, does that get included in the packet for them too?
Well, we
Just
have
so
like,
that we don't overstep.
we have all of our policies in like the new select board packet, for example, which I have recently read, right? We have all of our policies.
Not for the
in
select
there.
board, I'm talking about other boards and
other
committees.
boards, yeah.
That's, yeah.
So for example, it's, the select board has appointed new committees in the past. So how do they get the communication that they should adopt a policy like that? I think that somehow in that process, as the committee is stood up, this should be included in the information that they have. The policy template and that cover letter so that they can adopt the policy
All the
too.
boards even have policy documents. in
No.
general,
No.
yeah.
No.
So-
No, but at least that
Doesn't
way
mean you
they're
can't
you're
adopt a
sure that
policy,
they
though.
have an opportunity to, you know, take a look at it and consider it.
They should be educated so we don't misstep.
Well, you want to encourage them to have this policy specifically, even if they don't have any others.
Well,
Especially if they have a
I
public
think
That was what
input.
the cover letter said, yeah.
Yeah, if they have a public input
Yeah.
section especially.
So maybe we can talk about it next time, but I think that we ought to figure out how it doesn't drop when a new board or committee is assigned. And maybe it needs to be part of the orientation packet even that new members get. So they're aware of the court case and the policy that's been asked to be adopted.
Well, maybe we can add this to our conversation about, our conversation with the committees and boards about, you know, we have a bigger conversation going on separately with them about the feedback from the survey last year and
Yeah.
about how we want to handle onboarding and stuff. Maybe we can kind of add this to that conversation as something that we suggest they add to whatever their onboarding documentation is. Do you know what I
I can
mean?
incorporate that in what we've been working on,
Yeah.
but my comment is kind of
Yeah.
separate from that.
Right, but I think the point is we almost need like an
How do you
online,
institutionalize?
yeah, an online link that of all the materials that one would have if you're creating a new committee or if you're joining a committee, you know, and it goes from the fundamental required ones like open meeting
I
law,
want
ethics
to,
law.
be careful that I didn't move us off of the
No,
stated
but,
agenda
no, but I
topic,
agree,
but
yeah.
like,
I
could
get
we
what you're
put
getting
something like that on to talk about next time?
Sure.
That's a great thought, Paul.
Okay, so we'll continue this at next meeting. Okay, Paul?
Okay, brief report this evening as we enter our third hour, but I'll be real quick of the report this evening. First one is I'm pleased to inform the board that with the assistance of town council and Finance Director John Souza, who wired the money and so forth, we're on record. We've acquired the parcel off of Wilson Lane that was approved at town meeting back in April. It was just about, 6 weeks ago. So that is now on record, and I provided in the packet, and you have on the screen a copy of the deed for the property. So again, we want to thank the Gordons for their coordination and cooperation with the town and all who, including the town meeting reps, consideration of that parcel. So again, it does expand that corridor by Stony Brook. And then the other part of my, when it was sort of stolen earlier by Representative Barrett, Senator Barrett, the $75,000 for the Chelmsford Public Schools electrification roadmap study was adopted in the Senate budget. And as the senator indicated, it's likely it will survive the process barring the unforeseen, such as, so that's good news, and we'll keep you updated as that progresses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next is appointments.
Yeah, you have the list prepared by Christina Bruce, which is daunting. This is, in addition to her licensing in the fall, this is probably the busiest one in the spring, the annual appointments. You see she segregated them by select board appointments and by manager appointments that are confirmed by the select board. And then what's not on this list is, right now is people who have not responded. So the reason we put it at your first meeting is June is we got the bulk out of the way, and then we're able to chase down the stragglers. And then if there are ex officio, meaning people who hold by virtue of office, that's not on the list either. So, for example, if the member of the town accountant or the public works director is a member of the community preservation committee, well, then they're not put on for a term because they serve by virtue of the office. What Christina did do, and it took considerable effort, is she staggered the terms in terms of the board's directive of, having the 3-year staggered terms for all committees whenever possible. So that's why you see these 2s and 1s and 3s spread throughout. And so that was a great effort. And so again, that's what we have for you this evening. And again, we'll come back with the additional ones at your next meeting. And then after that, then it'll be closed, and then you'll see the updated committee vacancy list. So that's what you have here before you this evening. Again, these are incumbents who have notified us that they wish to stay. And as I mentioned a moment ago, Christina Bruce asked them if they had specific term issues regarding the staggered terms, and she accommodated that to the extent possible.
Is this something we want to take up as a full slate?
Yeah.
Try to go down this? Okay, good. I'll take a motion if there's no further discussion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the fiscal *24 annual appointments as presented.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye, 5-0. That was a big one. Okay, next is the appointment of legal counsel. Now we have a letter.
Yes, you do. Good evening, Tricia Durst, Town Clerk. Thank you very much. Just given the hour, I won't bother to read the letter that's in the packet. But basically, I'm here to ask the board to reappoint Special Counsel Lauren Goldberg of KP Law to the Board of Registrars for elections. And I'm also asking the board to consider again having KP Law and Lauren Goldberg represent the Town Clerk's office. Last time we asked this, it was a concern about public records mostly, that it was being handled by several different departments and council was involved in that. And I just wanted to bring up the point that public records, as the public records compliance officer and the department that manages the FOIA Direct program, that all public records really should be filtered through the clerk's office. And so it should be a central area for council as well. There's many other reasons why Copeland and KP Law, and Lauren Goldberg are experts in municipal law, not just for elections, but public records law, conflict of interest, open meeting law, charter amendments, home rule petitions, so many different things that the town clerk's office is responsible for filing and executing in a proper way. And as I mentioned in my letter, about 90% of our actions are governed by Mass General Law. So Copeland and Page is the premier law firm in the state of Massachusetts. And they've been very helpful in the past with public records. Mostly, there's been an increase in public records requests overall. There's with many different aspects, but there's also been an increase in the abuse of the public records law. And compiling a case and advocating for the supervisor of records and the secretary of the Commonwealth when it comes to public records law, I think is also an important aspect for an attorney to have very in-depth knowledge about what the municipalities and Commonwealths are, in the Commonwealth are dealing with. So that being said, and all of the other rave reviews about her as a person, if anybody has came downstairs during our recent recount, saw how important it was to have representation be there for an instance such as that. It really gives a lot of reassurance, not just for the town clerk and all of the workers participating in the recount, but also for the candidates, and that helping to explain the processes and making sure it's all very clear. It's just been really, really helpful. So thank you for your appointment of her in the past for Board of Registrars, and I'd ask you to please consider expanding her special counsel roles to the town clerk's office in general.
Any questions for Trish? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
What other discussion points do we have on this?
I think Trish makes some good points as far as the reasons that the same person should do the registrars and the town clerk, basically, because they do kind of work hand in hand.
I actually had a informal discussion with town council regarding some of this, and he was, he thought it was, had merit, and he thought, he will be here at the next meeting, and I think that he should probably maybe speak to it himself, but we did have an at-length discussion about this, so I'll let him speak for himself.
Super. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay.
So we're not going to vote on it tonight?
I would
I'm not
prefer,
comfortable voting on it
I would
until
prefer
we
to
get
continue
Wayne
this
from-
unless
And
there's other, yeah.
No,
other comments.
I would like to hear directly from town council. I would suggest that maybe a conversation between him and KP Law might be appropriate if he wants to do that. But last year, we exhausted the discussion on what the interpretations of the motion that was made in 2019 and the letter from town council around which that discussion was. So I just don't feel it's appropriate to keep hashing through that, and we just need to start today and move forward and figure out what makes the most sense. I have concerns about throwing open meeting law and conflict of interest into this because I think that spans much more than just the clerk's office. It spans every board and committee and commission. And I know, I've gone to council on both of those things, and I haven't had any issues with that, and his firm represents other municipalities and actually has somebody on staff from KP Law. The public records part, I could see. I am concerned a little bit that in 4 years, this board has never actually heard from Lauren Goldberg. And I remember one incident where we found out about it after the fact, but she had worked with Tricia on an extensive letter regarding someone who.
Oh.
I would like to comment on that. If you have a chance.
Tricia, this is, I am speaking respectfully.
When you're
How do you
done,
boot him
I
from
would
the
like to
room?
comment.
Tricia, could you just hang on a second?
Of course.
Please.
I've never actually seen this happen.
Oh, we had a real bad one.
Really?
Remove, yeah.
I've never seen
Point
it
of
live.
order, I would like to finish speaking.
Yeah.
So there was an extensive letter written, which was very well written, and then the state turned it down, but in every other instance where we kind of go outside of the norm, those things are brought to the board. And I'm not blaming anyone, but I think that would have been something that perhaps in hindsight, we should bring to the board. So if we do get into situations where there are anomalies like that, I would like to see more coordination with the appointing authority that way. And again, I don't feel that it would be appropriate to make a decision this evening without having a second discussion that involves all of the stakeholders and getting some clarity around capabilities and concerns.
And I
Thank
just
you.
want to say that for the new board member that's here, the year that Kopelman and Page drafted that petition for me, that harassment petition, she was appointed as special counsel.
No, I'm not, Tricia, I'm not arguing that at all. I'm just, and again, it's not a criticism, but in hindsight, that was so out of the ordinary,
Not in the town
that
clerk's
particular,
world.
but.
Not in
but
the town clerk's world, it's not,
I'm,
Virginia.
I'm just
And we
going
deal
from,
with fee
excuse me, could I
petitions.
finish my
Well,
statement? Thank
okay,
you.
I was asking to speak after you had
So-
finished, so.
So all I'm saying is that with town council, with labor council, when there are things that stretch above and beyond kind of the day-to-day work, that comes in front of the board somehow. And
Not in the town clerk's office,
Well,
Virginia, it doesn't. There are
it
things
doesn't-
that the town clerk
It
is
may not now.
responsible.
It may not now, but all I'm saying is if there is a huge anomaly like that, it may
It's
be
not
appropriate.
a huge anomaly.
Oh, that
It
one was
isn't.
different.
There have been harassment petitions issued by other cities and towns throughout the
Tricia, I'm
Commonwealth.
not going to argue. I can
And
have
you
an
don't
opinion.
need to argue. I just wanted to make sure for clarity, we do have a new board member, and I didn't want her to have the wrong impression about the facts as stated. So,
Thank you.
and if anybody does have any questions about previous conversations or don't recall it, I do have the documentation, and I do know that there was one miscommunication between me and Paul Haverty when I had given him a courtesy phone call and a courtesy email back and forth, and it was my miscommunication to him.
And
And
I'm
then
just gonna
his
say, I
misunderstanding,
don't-
but it wasn't the very first year that we
I
appointed.
don't think it's productive to keep going
And that's okay, but
backwards.
I don't get up here very often to speak to you,
Mm-hmm.
and since it is my time on the agenda to speak about something that's very important to my office, I think it's important that you hear me out as well.
Thank
So thank
you.
you for that courtesy.
Thank
And I
you.
appreciate, and I would like to be invited to the next meeting as well, if we're gonna have this conversation continue. Thank you very much, appreciate it.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Procedurally or historically speaking, is it common practice for us to employ different firms for different?
That's going back.
I mean, I know we have like a
going wa-
labor, I
it's
know we have a
going way
labor, yeah, so, but is that common practice in other towns? Is that common practice here?
I don't know
I don't
about other
know.
towns.
Maybe you should ask other towns. I mean, I
I mean, can we have that discussion here? Because I am new, so I'm, for the purpose of me thinking about this over the next 2 weeks, I mean, should I have this conversation outside of this table? Or
Probably
can-
outside of this meeting.
It would
Sure.
probably
Yeah.
help.
Well, okay, I mean, is it uncomfortable? I don't know, can we?
The genesis of why we have, this happened before I was elected too, Aaron, but my understanding is that when a previous select board decided to have what is now BBHS be town council, they don't do labor law, and they are very open about that.
Yeah.
And so
So that's why we hired the
we have
labor.
a separate
Yeah.
council for labor law.
Yeah,
And then there were some specialized needs out of the clerk's office
yeah,
that seem to have gone in different places over the years.
okay.
And
is
so
that-
right now, what we have is BBHS is town council, KP Law is labor council.
Yeah,
KP Law is also special counsel to the select board for the town manager.
Yeah.
We have a separate person for that.
Mhm.
And then KP Law is special counsel to the clerk and the board of registrars for elections.
Okay.
That's our current state.
okay.
And
thank
so
you.
what Trish is asking is that we consider expanding the scope of what KP Law does for the clerk's
For
office
registrar and-
due to her specialized needs and their expertise.
So is that, so, yeah, so is that kind of common, I'm just curious if that's kind of common practice, or if most municipalities just have one firm, or is it? Is it unusual that we do things this way? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
would-
BBHS is town council for other municipalities, so they're doing it this way.
I look at the breadth
I don't look at,
of legal requirements that a municipality has.
Makes sense that there'd be multiple.
Well,
councils.
either it does, or that they have a larger firm that has several different, areas that they would.
That can specialize in all
Because you'd
those.
be getting
Exactly,
different
because
attorneys
we are
from that
getting
firm.
more and more specialized as time goes by, so.
Yeah.
Just have to see, but, like I said, I did have a discussion with town council about this, and I'll let him speak for himself at the next meeting. And you can ask him questions if you'd like.
Thank you for the
Yeah.
background. I appreciate it.
What I can say in closing, and this is not to jump in the middle of it, it's rather common for towns to have separate legal labor counsel than general counsel.
That's
And
very common,
That's fairly common. If you look across the Commonwealth, it's fairly common.
Because
So
that
that's
is super
that's not unheard
specialized.
of. Yeah. So that's, if you go on that, the other thing I'll point out is. The town also utilizes special counsel for these extraordinary cases like the opioid settlement. We have special counsel for that and so
Yes,
forth.
thank you, Paul.
And so what it does, and also towns will utilize special counsel if there's a conflict between boards.
Yeah.
Like if there's a conflict between the planning board and the Board of Appeals over a case and you have to represent two parties, well, then you have to bring in special counsel.
They
to
wanna bring
represent
in
the-
outside
An outside counsel for that board.
and we have different
and-
counsel for insurance
we have
too,
different-
right?
Yeah, we have insurance counsel, all those cases, and also the school committee has separate counsel.
Okay.
Because of their autonomy, so they have a
Yeah.
different firm that does the schools, so. And then the board, does have the right at any time, any board or city or town can bring in special counsel for a particular matter that's of extreme complexity.
Yeah.
Like if we were gonna, as you're seeing it now with the PFAS litigation
Yeah,
and other stuff.
exactly. That's
so.
the one that comes
Anyway,
to
I'm
mind
sorry.
immediately.
I'm trying to give
No,
you
thank
insight
you.
without
Thank you.
getting into the board's prerogatives. so.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, so we're gonna continue this to the next meeting. Next up is meeting minutes. Select Board regular meeting minutes, 5/15/23. Are there any comments, suggestions?
Make a motion that we approve the regular meeting minutes for May 15, 2023 as presented.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And the next, announcement of determination of releasability of executive session minutes. Minutes not for release, May 1, 2023, segments 1, 2, and 3. Okay, next item's going to be out of order. We're going to take 15 as 14, and that will be the liaison reports. George, do you have anything?
All set, thank you.
All set? Virginia?
I don't have any liaison reports, but a couple things came to mind during this meeting for potential future agenda topics, if you don't mind. One is, when you had first brought up lighting the monument, Paul, we had asked to try to have a discussion with council about that. So I would like to see us formalize that, because I don't think this is a question of, we don't know yet if the board is gonna have a policy. And it's the same thing, like, you made the first decision, and now it's the board's job. And so if it is, I'd really like to just formalize that on an agenda so we can kind of all get it straight
I
and know what
actually
we're going to do.
was going to propose that for 2024 policy update.
I don't know if we can wait, because,
Well, I
Well-
think we can wait,
okay,
because we don't need to light it up tomorrow, but we do need to have a well-thought-out policy, and whether it's, I mean, if we want
But-
to
but
push it
if-
into July.
if
I mean, we
another,
can.
and if another request comes, I think we need to know
We have
if
no
or how we
policy.
handle it. But the first request didn't come to the board, right? So my question mark is, if, in the absence of a policy, are any requests really Paul's right now? And that's the answer I don't understand.
I think the answer to that question is no.
Okay,
And I also think that that initial lighting was more of a pilot, just to see.
so we're getting off agenda. All I'm asking is for an agenda topic to be put on, and we can decide whether we want it as a policy for 2024 or later.
that.
Okay. My second question, Paul, was, would it make sense to put something on an agenda about the minutes enforcement? Because we had kind of a path we thought was going to work, but it's not working, and I think we need to talk about how we help make that work, or what else we need to do.
Discuss that, too.
And then, I think it was over a year ago, Pat had asked that we talk about double polls, and I'm just wondering if it's time to just get an updated status on that at some point. And I had heard that we have a bylaw that we're supposed to be charging like $300 per double pole. Do we do that?
I don't
Does that
think we have,
exist?
isn't that a state thing that they never enforce or something?
Oh, that's a state thing? It's not a town bylaw?
We'll have a report, we'll seek as a report from the utilities of double poles for your next meeting. We have
And
3 weeks.
none of
and
these are like urgent,
report- no,
but I
we'll
just
try to
think
get
we
them.
ought to put them back in the queue at some point.
While they're top of mind, yeah.
Thank
No,
you.
while we're in, we'll try to get it. We have 3 weeks
It's a
to our
good
next
time now.
meeting. I'll do the best I can
Yeah.
to get information.
Okay. Anything else?
No,
Pat?
Yeah, I have a few things. For the library, last week, McKay finally reopened up in North Chelmsford with a big ribbon cutting, and that was it's well received up there, and it's so good that the McKay Library is finally reopened. On June 22nd, there's going to be the annual poetry slam at the main library at 6:30 p.m. Next week, there'll be 2 Flag Day ceremonies on Wednesday, June 14th. The first will be at the Garrison House at 3:30, and the second will be at the Elks at 6 p.m. If you want to attend either of those Flag Day ceremonies, both are open to the public. And congratulations to the graduates from Neshoba and Chelmsford High School. Both sets of seniors graduated last Saturday. Good luck to them in the future.
Thank you. Aaron? Okay, I have one from the Roberts Field group. The community in the town of Chelmsford are establishing a memorial play area at Friendship Park. Many of you know, at Roberts Field in Chelmsford, Mass, to celebrate the life and spirit of Junie Dillon, who passed away unexpectedly in December of '22. The campaign will run from 6:16 to 6:30, and it focuses on spreading joy and kindness throughout the community. Kids are at the center of this campaign, learning about kindness and how to spread it. There are some fun events planned for those 2 weeks, including but not limited to dance, fitness classes for kids, adults, dinners, and a session with a photographer, and much more. There are currently 25 local businesses signed up to participate in Junie's Joy, and more are signing up daily. If you wish to learn more information or if you care to donate, please go to www.juniesplace.org or to the Friends of Robertsfield Facebook page. And that's it. Anything else? Take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn to executive session, not to return to open session for the purpose to discuss strategy with respect to deployment of security devices and to review executive session meeting minutes from May 15, 2023, segments 1, 2, 3, and 4.
I'll second.
George?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
Aaron? Pat?
Aye.
And I'm aye. We are adjourned, 5-0.